So we're going to make it fun, simultaneously fun, but also very serious. In fact, that's part of the space we have to hold as we evolve into the next stage of the evolution of consciousness, what I call Epoch 6, and some theorists call integral, and some call metamodern or metacognition. As we have to be able to hold that sincerity and irony simultaneously. We have to be able to hold the space within our transcendent self that the world is arising exactly as it should, in complete beauty and perfecting itself, and that we feel bliss as our ground state. And simultaneously, we have to also be in the relative realm, the world that's evolving, the world of space and time, and the world that's desperately suffering right now, and in a state of regression. And we have to hold the seriousness of that. And it's not contradictory from that next stage of human evolution, from that metacognitive place. It becomes both and, not either or. Both the world is arising exactly as it should in divine perfection from an absolute sense, from that taste of infinity, and simultaneously the relative realm, the world of space and time, the world of matter and manifestation, is entering into the late stages of a complete era or epoch. The late stages of modernity is what a lot of theorists call it. We call it the deficiency stage of the modern world. And we're at the end of an era, and it's starting to produce an inordinate amount of suffering in the relative realm. And for me, this work, and what part of what we're going to tease out here, is that what we are doing ultimately is promoting both of those paths. They're both paths to salvation. The path to growing up, which is what this retreat is really all about, and the path to waking up, which is escaping the whole growing up path. And we have to have both of those things. And because we're essentially in the relative realm, in the finite world, in the world of space and time and matter and manifestation, we're in a race between consciousness and catastrophe. The solution to all of the world's problems are more consciousness. It's to evolve. What's happening right now is the level of complexity that's been created in the world has exceeded the capacity of our own cognitive bandwidth and of its corollary neurological flexibilities in the brain. So the brain-mind simply cannot process reality, because reality has increased at an exponential rate, and what's in here in the brain-mind has not. And so the solution is to create more complexity in here. Literally, more complexity in here, right? As people move into the next stage of human evolution, developmentally, one of the hallmarks of that is the increased ability to process complexity, because complexity increases. More neuronal connections in the brain start to fire in new ways. We start to get coherence or hemisphericity, where the nervous system increases its ability to process information and energy in the environment, and the mind, then the cognitive elements, increase their bandwidth, so that as what is in here becomes more complex, what is out there becomes more simple. Right now, what's out there is too complex and what's in here is too simple. And there's a dissonance between what's arising in space-time and what we're able to process neurologically and cognitively. And when this happens, we come to a bifurcation point. And then it's either break down and break through, or break down and regress to lower stables of organization, lower levels of complexity that are more organized. And that's what's happening right now. It's happening to us politically, it's happening in the culture, it's happening at the world at large. The inability to process the complexity of the world has created, there's no way to exist in when what's out there cannot possibly enter into here, and where we cannot source truth or values from that. And when that happens, the dissonance between what's out there and what's in here creates this lower level of stability where we start going back to what we call mythic, literal structures of consciousness, or magical thinking structures of consciousness, or power-centered, egocentric structures of consciousness that all allow us a certain firm foothold by regressing in a way that we can still find stability. Because right now we can't find stability in this kind of post-modern or late-stage deficiency stages of the modern world. And so the solution that we want is not regression, that's what's happening. The solution is progression, the solution is evolution, the solution is being able to move up to that next stage of the evolution of consciousness, where we increase neurological flexibility and cognitive bandwidth, and what's out there becomes simple because we start to see the patterns, the synchronicities, the systemic ways things are aligned, and intuition starts to emerge. So we're not just trying to use discursive intellect or rationality to figure everything out that cannot be figured out. And so the growing up path is about moving to the next evolutionary stage of consciousness and creating that meta-mind, because it is a race right now in the species between awakening and apocalypse. And we're facing it, right? I just had a text yesterday from who is probably the most sophisticated integral thinker in the world that's working in the environmental movement. And we just discussed a book that came out called The Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warming by David Wells Wallace. And I asked him if he was in alignment with the book, and he said yes. He's an extremely important journalist right now. I follow his articles in New York Magazine. I recommend the one from a couple of days ago on international obliviousness to the Australian wildfires. But bear in mind that he's mainstream and materialistic, not integral or awakened. Don't look to him to help create a miracle. I said, yes, that's my assumption. I bought the book. Thanks for your take. Hope you're great. I'm in Miami about to host a retreat tomorrow. He says, right on, Michael. Keep teaching and fostering saludogenesis. Saludogenesis is that process that we liberate that helps wake up those higher capacities of the brain. And so that is where we're at. And we're going to focus on this retreat on simultaneously waking up higher capacities of the brain by liberating that inner organic technology. That's a lifetime practice. We want to deepen that at retreats, at workshops, every time that we can come together in person, apply the hands-on element. And then we want to do the daily practice every day, because we're cultivating a new way to move energy to higher dormant structures of the human brain. And we have to get energy into higher structures of the human brain. That's how we increase neurological flexibility, because it's the higher centers of the brain, right? The lower brain is what creates, is what can't process reality. And it's overloading the system. And so as we can get energy into the higher centers of the brain, we can start to increase neurological flexibility. We can start to adapt to environmental information and energy in a new way, because we have more bandwidth to do so. And simultaneously, we want to wake up the corollary mind, the higher mind that correlates with the higher brain, which creates more cognitive bandwidth and the ability to, what we call cognitive complexity, to emerge, so that we can, in our minds, process more of the information in the world that is now a world that is now being called a post-truth world, because we don't know what's true. We don't know how to source truth right now in the world. And the solution, again, is to be able to move up to a level where the complexity of the brain and mind is greater, its ability to process is greater than the complexity of the world out there. And when that happens, it starts getting more simple, because we quit trying to process all the information and we start intuitively seeing the patterns and the links and the connections and the synchronicities that start to emerge from that higher level of processing in the brain and mind. And so the way that is driven is through initially as a base state that we want to happen for humanity, the ability to unlock that inner organic technology in them, to move that energy up to the higher capacities of the brain, to awaken higher centers of the brain, and then introduce the meditation, which awakens higher capacity of the mind. That needs to be a base state. We have to help people wake up to that higher brain and higher mind. And so from there, what? From there, what is the question? And so this retreat is part of the from there, what? It's the part that we call growing up. Again, it's evolving in space-time with and I'm going to unpack more of this, but the authentic self, that part of us that when it's really contracted, we call the ego, and as it starts to grow and emerge into its authenticity, we call it the authentic self. And it's that part of us that operates in the world of space and time, and it's that part of us that's driven by purpose, big purpose. Purpose becomes the fuel of evolution as we're moving into the next stage of human development. So purpose is the fuel that has to drive us vertically into the next stage of evolution. So today we will continue to refine the ability to unlock that inner organic technology, to wake up higher capacity of the brain, to wake up higher capacity of the mind. We want to do that forever, to continue to increase our base state in that way. And then tomorrow we're going to be using that higher brain mind state to discover the deep soul essence, the deep purpose that's within us, and to be able to liberate in a way that we develop a way for the authentic self to start to live that big, deep purpose in the world, and to then climb up the evolutionary ladder, so to speak, with the brain mind into the next stage of human development. And through tomorrow, it's what does that next stage of human development look like to you specifically? What is your unique purpose, right? There's only ever going to be one of you. And there's a signature that has to be left in the world. And that's what we want to discover tomorrow and develop the tools to start to anchor that purpose, that vision, that soul essence. We want to anchor that into that higher brain, higher mind complex, because that's the physiology as well as the interior mind states that are needed to actually live that authentic purpose in the world. Okay, is everybody with me? I'm talking kind of fast, aren't I? I'm going to slow down a little bit. Okay, there. Now, so one of the things that so I'm going to ask something. We have fun as a community, and we're going to have some community time in this to really connect. But I want to hold those simultaneous positions that we're here to have fun. We're here to experience joy. I mean, Ananda, bliss is our base state, right? We need to know that. We want to know that. But at the same time, this life is really serious, and what we're doing is really serious. And the world needs people that are showing up really seriously, really earnestly with this project to help evolve and to help wake up and to help bring our unique gifts into a fragmented, deconstructing, suffering world. And I believe that when you show up for this, there's a reason that you show up for this that's greater than just what the intellect can imagine. And there's a certain destiny in it that you're part of the solution, right? And we have to be part of the solution. And so we have to bring our joy, our authenticity, and our purpose into the world, because I think ultimately that's why we're here. And it's desperately needed. And one of the things that I have pushed into a lot and written about even is that most of the techniques and practices and technologies within the New Age, New Thought, spiritual but not religious communities are impotent in the face of the complexity of the late stage modern world. They just don't have the amplitude to create the kind of change that needs to happen. And so the world just simply overwhelms the potency of the techniques and the systems and the teachings. And so we want to go at this with some depth to really understand what's happening. We're not going to understand all of what's happening, but to understand these concepts, because the concepts are important. There's a tendency also in the New Age, New Thought, New Spiritual but not religious circles to want to completely check out from understanding or teaching, i.e. context, because we just want to have experience. And this is one of the things that you will probably hear me teach about with every single event that we do, because it's one of the most important understandings that you can possibly ever have. And if you really understand it, it will change your life. But there is no such thing as experience without context. You walked through that door with a story in your head, even if you're not conscious of it. You walk through that door with all of the experience, all of the belief systems, all the way you think the world is supposed to work, all of the things you've tried that didn't work, all the way you formed your philosophy, your epistemology, all of that you walk through here with, and it's all operating as a hidden meaning-making map. And that hidden meaning-making map will sort your experience. It will sort your experience in a way that changes how you behave in the world. It changes what you do with that experience, or what that experience really becomes. So it's not just the experience, it's the experience plus the context that experience is filtered within that creates this third emergent property. And that third emergent property emerges from the actual experience we have, combining with the contextualization that it's filtered through our hidden meaning-making maps with. There's no such thing even as enlightenment without a context that it's sorted through, which is how we make sense out of the world, that fully enlightened Buddhist masters supported the most atrocious things during World War II. That right now, currently, there are Myanmar Burmese Buddhist monks that are declared fully enlightened that are supporting the extermination of Rohingya Muslims because they're ethnocentrically different than them. Because their hidden meaning-making maps are a certain level of development within the evolution of consciousness in space-time. Their enlightenment is absolute, but it's being filtered through context. And so we can't just have awesome experience and horrible context. We have to have awesome experience and awesome context, and those two things together create something new. Okay, is everybody with me on this? So, one of the things I also always say is that what you already know needs celebrated, because it's what brought you here. In one way or another, it's what brought you here, what you already know. And I find it that extraordinary. Every time I go and I see people that show up, I find it extraordinary that something in you, the path that you've been on for decades, the things that you've done, the things that you've tried, the things that you've learned, the experiences you've had, all put you here right now. And without all of that, right, I couldn't even express my purpose. So your path was beautiful. But then we hit a paradox at this movement into the metamodern or metacognitive, or what I call Epoch 6. The paradox is that what you already know is what put you here, and now what you already know is the greatest detriment to going beyond here. Because what you already know becomes ossified and becomes the hidden meaning-making map that all experience gets sorted through. So what I ask of everyone is to be open enough to not try to create analogy or metaphor or relate every single thing that happened to something you already know. And I always say, You can go back to that Monday. but for now, just try to keep the space open for not knowing. And as we have experience, as we open that brain and mind up, we open space up to create new context for new experience that allows something to emerge much, much, much greater. And so our keys today then are to develop more mastery with what we call forming the source code meditation base, which is what will happen here in about an hour for you on a table, being facilitated by one of our New Human University elite students that will cue these pathways in just the right way and just the right time that releases this energy that flows to the higher centers of the brain. And we want to get really good at that, because that is that ability to move that energy to the brain through what I call the liberation of an inner organic technology, where your breath starts to change. You start to feel a rhythmicity or an expansion. It starts to become feedback. It's an emergent property in your physiology coming online that was largely dormant. And we know that it increases neurological complexity. And we want to have that come to the front and be a guiding part of the life process. And so every single event that gets prioritized, because there's no limit to how refined and sophisticated that can become. So as we wake up that inner organic technology, as we wake up that inner organic technology and it starts to mobilize this sacred energy in the body, it starts to get more energy in the brain. And we're going to really emphasize that the first half of the day. The second half of the day, we will emphasize introducing the meditation, where it wakes up higher capacity of the mind as the higher brain is being awoken. And so again, I'm going to tease all of this out now, but for one, the concepts that I want to anchor in right now are that we are liberating energy within our bodies, latent energy, through the unlocking of an inner organic technology, a latent feedback mechanism that is in us, that has been evolutionarily laid down but is not emergent. Okay, there's evidence. I have a section in my book about it. The first birds, the first dinosaurs developed feathers and appendages, did not fly. And there was a process of getting that emergent potential online to take flight. And so we have this latent mechanism, feedback mechanism, inner organic technology that we can not only bring online, but that we can cultivate, nurture, and advance throughout a lifetime. And that has the impact of dissipating the stress response, dissipating lower brain physiology, and moving more energy to the higher structures of the brain. And that we want to be able to do for a lifetime, as we then introduce the meditation, which I'll go into more detail and more detail and more detail, which wakes up the higher capacities of the mind, so that for a lifetime we awaken the brain and we awaken the mind, and we create more complexity in the nervous system and more cognitive bandwidth, so that we can then see the simplicity and the beauty, truth, and goodness that's out there that we have to enact from a higher stage of consciousness, because we can't get there from here. And so as we then work to liberate that energy, to nurture that inner organic technology, to wake up the brain and wake up the mind, we have to do something with that. And this work is based on what's called the 9 summits of transformation. And that's the how do you do something with that? Where do you go from there? And the 9 summits of transformation are a very complete, integrally informed system and path that incorporates every known path of human growth, awakening, and evolution. And we want to negotiate that path, navigate that path, embody that path from that higher brain, higher mind perspective or awakening. And this particular retreat is called the growing up part of those 9 summits, which technically is summits 4 and 5. And our hope is that we have 3 retreats that encompass the entire 9 summits. So wake up, grow up, clean up, show up, retreat. And we even package those. I'll introduce more of that to you tomorrow in a way that you can get all 3 of them. Each one contains elements of the others, but each one emphasizes the key point of waking up, growing up, cleaning up, or showing up. And again, I'm going to unpack more of this. I know I'm talking fast. I'm putting a lot of information out there right now. Just trust that what needs to get in is going to get in, and you're going to get what you need.